We were on a highly classified mission in the mid-1980s aboard an experimental deep-sea submarine, a Soviet countermeasure acoustic surveillance vessel that only a few in the Navy knew existed. I'm an acoustic reconnaissance specialist, and this is my confession. I still hear it sometimes, the sound of ships' propellers high above, booming through 16,000 feet of water. We were 3 miles down under the Pacific surface, where no ordinary ship should have been able to reach. It was late October 1984, in the pitch-black ocean abyss. I remember the suffocating pressure in every compartment, around 500 atmospheres, approximately 7,300 psi, pressing in on us. We were running silent, no active sonar pings, relying entirely on passive acoustic sensors. My station was the hydrophone rack in the sonar room, surrounded by low-wattage screens showing spectrum analyzers and low-fargrams, low-frequency analysis and recording. The sub's hull was anechoically coated to be nearly invisible to sonar. Our mission? Listen. We trailed the Pacific abyss between US and Soviet subs, intercepting any stray acoustic signatures of Soviet patrols, downed black boxes, or secret underwater cables. On paper, the ship, call sign USS Silvertide, AGSSX, was an oceanographic research sub based in Pearl Harbor. In reality, it was fitted with a nuclear reactor and a heavy battery pack to sustain extreme depths. Only 15 crew in all, the captain, a hard-edged commander, an XO, lieutenant commander, our sonar chief, the communications officer, and a few engineers. I was Petty Officer Jake Reese, 27, fresh from deep sound training at ONR. The chain of command was rigid. Every new piece of data went up from me to the sonar chief to the captain. We were the quietest, deepest diving sub on Earth, a bit like the NR-1 experimental submarine, but far more specialized. NR-1 had a test depth of only about 3,000 feet, but Silvertide was built to go much deeper. In secret line drawings, it resembled a stretched bathyscaphe mixed with a sleek nuclear sub. Before this patrol, we got a quick intel briefing. The Navy reminded us of the SOFAR channel, that deep ocean sound channel around 800 to 1,000 meters depth, where pressure and temperature bends low-frequency sound waves to travel for thousands of miles. SOSIS hydrophone arrays, sound surveillance system, had used that channel since the 1950s to eavesdrop on Soviet subs. On shore, they even placed LOFAR equipment like we had here. In one slide, there was the chilling note that Challenger Deep is about 36,000 feet down. At that depth, pressure tops 1,100 atmospheres, approximately 16,000 psi. We joked uncomfortably that even Mars was easier to explore than the ocean bottom. But if SOSIS could pick up a whale fart from 3,000 miles, maybe we could pick up a diesel engine from 2 miles beneath the waves. I still recall our setup in the sonar room, the hooch as the men called it. On the starboard wall was an analog LOFAR spectrogram machine with blinking lights and paper readouts tuned to 10 to 1,000 hertz, where propeller noise sings. Next to it, an array of digital hydrophone channels tapped the hull's external sensors. Each hydrophone was fed through anti-alias filters and amplifiers, feeding separate FFT processors. Overhead, a monochrome CRT flickered raw waveforms. In deep water, even a faint click or thud would jump out. On the console were real-time trackers showing bearing of any coherent sound sources by beamforming the fixed array. The chief of sonar, Chief Petty Officer Ramirez, could triangulate a contact if it was loud enough on multiple sensors. Around us were bulky analog instruments, a bathymetric echo sounder for depth measurement, a CTD profiler to map water temperature, salinity versus depth, and the nuclear reactor's readouts. On a shelf lay a paper log and protractors, backup in case all digital systems failed. I had a pair of soft noise-canceling headphones to screen by ear and a deck of classified signal reference tapes for known Soviet submodels, Victor 1, Delta, etc., if needed. On the capstan nearby sat our inertial navigators and an analog gyro compass. GPS doesn't work 3 miles underwater, remember? Our immediate crew lineup, officers and senior petty officers, was roughly Captain Alice Uncle Al Monroe, commanding officer, level-headed and very old school. CDR Victor Huang, executive officer, engineering genius, dealt with our reactor and sub-mechanics. LT.JG Sarah Finch, navigator, operations, route planning and mission logs. CPO Ramon Ramirez, sonar chief, a gruff acoustic wizard who ran the sonar watch and LOFAR. Me, PO Jake Reese, acoustic intelligence specialist, also kept unofficial diaries. We also had 2 petty officers for systems and a few nuclear engineers in the engine room. No typical oilskins and boots seamen. Everyone was technical, stared at gauges or screens. The mission instructions were terse. Stay submerged under 16,000 feet, run silent, report any sonar contacts. No communication with Hawaii base unless absolutely critical. By policy, we were to cross the mid-Atlantic ridge in stealth mode, scanning for Soviet subs experimenting with ultra-low frequency sonar. Our front row enemy was a new Soviet bathyscaphic prototype, rumored to mimic Trieste's 1960 dive. If they found anything on the ocean floor, they'd be in the race of deep diving by now. We had to monitor. Bullets for my acoustic toolkit that day. Passive hydrophone arrays, multi-element fixed sensors on the hull, each channel covering different frequency bands down to a few hertz. These could pick up a Soviet sub's propeller hum from hundreds of miles away. The idea, at this depth there's a deep sound channel, so low bass from a surface ship might actually refract down to us. We banked on catching it. LOFAR spectrogram display. The Art of the State for 1984, low-frequency analysis and recording processor. It drew real-time frequency versus time LOFAR grams of whatever made noise. Submarines show up as distinct striated bands, each prop blade passage at a steady RPM. Ramirez loved to say LOFAR could distinguish a Soviet sub's engine signature, like reading the Mercedes for tire treads. Active sonar, optional. We had a low-power active pulse set called Dolphin for self-defense only. Normally, we never used it. Active sonar would blow our cover. On this secret mission, it stayed cold. Environmental sensors, bathythermograph, CTD probes, and an aneroid pressure gauge, all to calibrate sound speed profiles in the water. Sound speed varies with depth and temperature, bending acoustic paths. Before each listening watch, Finch or I would drop a small probe and log the sound velocity curve. Communication equipment, a secure VLF buoy for emergencies. At this depth, even VLF radio doesn't reach, but this buoy, nicknamed Jerry 1, could be shot to the surface in dire need. We also had an old AV deep water telephone patch to shore facilities, rarely used. Every night, I would watch Ramirez adjust a hydrophone preamplifier gain knob or readjust the LOFAR filter for maximum sensitivity. Silence was sacred. Even our reactor coolant pumps were throttled down, and the crew moved carefully to minimize noise. The radio man, Ensign Patel, monitored Morse band frequencies in case an SOS-US station pinged us for maintenance check. Otherwise, there was only darkness and distant ambient hum of the ocean. Little did we know that in the middle of that normality, something impossible was waiting. We think of the ocean as calm at great depths, but that night it wasn't.
It began quietly.
0300 hours, when the sub was at 15,800 feet under the Pacific Gyre. Ramirez was off shift. I was alone, monitoring Channel 3, mid-frequency band, on my headphones. Suddenly, a rhythmic thump came through the system. It was a low, steady rumble, twice per second, like a ship's propeller turning at low RPM. I froze. The signal was crystal clear, centered at about 60 hertz with overtones. Impossible. There was nothing living or mechanical this deep. Nothing should break the silence this consistently. Passive sensors normally pick up whales or distant shipping, but whale calls are irregular and higher pitched, and shipping noise was near nil. No surface ship anywhere in our area on the charts. Plus, whales don't plod in patterns. I instantly checked the graphical LOFAR display. Sure enough, bright diagonal lines on the LOFAR-gram, each line spaced evenly at 0.5-second intervals. It looked exactly like a steady diesel engine signature. "Captain," I said into the comm, forcing my voice level. "I'm getting a slow thunk-thunk noise. Sounds like a propeller cycle, about half a cycle per second, bearing approximately 15 degrees off the bow. On a digital readout, I saw an unexpected return on Nav Array 3, and it's straight above us. Captain Monroe, already up on the bridge, just above the sonar lab, murmured back, 'Ramirez, get down here.' In a minute, both she and Ramirez were at my shoulder. Ramirez frowned at the LOFAR-gram. 'That ain't our sub,' he muttered. I switched to beam-forming mode on the ship's fixed array. The bearing was indeed above us, which on a sub means near vertical upward direction. My stomach turned. Upward signals in bathypelagic depths should be whisper quiet. A ship's splashing propeller at the surface usually dies out by a few thousand feet, bounced away by the thermocline and surface scattering. Yet this was strong. The analysis of the sound's travel path suggested something like a surface source. The signal arrived with minimal Doppler shift and nearly vertical incidence. I began to recite every natural explanation we learned in training. Maybe a thermal inversion? Unlikely this deep. A reflection off the thermocline, found around 1,000 meters, could bounce surface noise downward, but that usually weakens it beyond detectability at 5,000 meters. The signature was too clear. The pattern didn't match whales, no skittering higher harmonics, or earthquake noises. Those are one-off cracks, not rhythmic pulses. Check for instrument glitch, I suggested carefully. Ramirez ordered me to switch off each hydrophone and bring them up one by one. The boom-boom persisted on every sensor. We even swapped filter bands to kill power line hum possibilities. Nothing changed. I ran a quick discrete FFT on the signal. The strongest line was at 60.2 hertz, with evenly spaced harmonics out to 300 hertz, exactly what you'd expect from a large four-bladed ship engine idling in deep, heavy seas. The room was silent, except for that knocking thud. Ramirez's knuckles turned white, gripping the console. "God damn it, what the hell is that?" he hissed, forgetting himself. Suddenly, that trivial expletive slipped out. It startled me. The captain held up a hand. She was a rigid Californian, and even she looked shaken. We double-checked our depth gauge, 16,200 feet. Morton's line, our deepest test at 16K. We were at crush depth, library answers had warned about. If a surface ship was that audible here, the sea was playing tricks. Something about that night in the lab sent my mind racing. We joked in school that in the ocean, sometimes you see your own shadow moving backward. But hearing a propeller overhead in crushing depths, that was unexplainable. Our silent computer logger spooled the odd waveform for record. Half an hour later, the captain called a meeting in the control room, the con. Everyone was tense. In the low green light, she briefed us in a clipped tone. "We have a legitimate sonar contact. Bearing says it's somewhere above us. No surface ship should be anywhere near. She displayed the LOFAR traces on the tactical screen. Ramirez, standing to the side, repeated my analysis. Slow 60 Hz pulses, almost vertical arrival. Lieutenant Finch was running environmental numbers. Sound speed profile is normal. There's no strong duct. I jumped in. We're right on the sound channel axis for our latitude, but normally that would bend sounds to us from far away, not amplify a noise straight above. I glanced at Ramirez. His face was pale. The captain asked for ideas. The XO, CDR Huang, rubbed his chin. Could it be some electrical bug, harpoon, or auto pulse malfunction, causing our own pumps to throb at 1 per second? He looked at the reactor monitors. The coolant pumps were at steady state. He tapped a chart. Even if the reactor pump had an oscillation, it'd be much faster than 60 Hz, or hum at 3,000 RPM, and we'd hear it directly, not through hull piping. Ramirez said quietly, "Sir, I cross-referenced known signals. The only match is a diesel boat hull at low RPM. Even the Russians use that frequency range in some port detail engines." The captain didn't flinch. "We're in the middle of nowhere. The nearest Soviet base is hundreds of miles away, and at 16,000 feet below, no ship's propeller should be audible, period." One of our young sonar techs, Petty Officer Hale, piped up, voice quavering. "Maybe it's a glitch in the data link. We did just cross a thermocline." But even as he spoke, I confirmed it on all channels again. We went through a 20-point checklist. Seal the hull, vent no air, back off engines, reroute power. The sound never changed. If anything, it grew louder on the LOFAR-gram. Each tick boom was like a hammer stroke in the cabin. The only conversation anyone could think of was bewildered silence or whispered asides. Nobody laughed it off. The military fun had vanished. Drills were forgotten. We were locked on that one clue. Even the XO admitted later he started replaying old Cold War lore. Remember Project Necton? Trieste hearing whales in trenches, but never a ship. Trieste's 1960 dive to 35,814 feet came up in mind. The deepest humans had gone. That dive was meticulously planned. They had depth-tested hulls and came up with perfect data. They reported silence except their own machinery hum. Us, meanwhile, something was softly thumping all around us. One of our officers joked quietly, terrified humor. Maybe the Krakens learned to dock ships in our waters. We fell silent. Nobody wanted to laugh or make more jokes. As hours passed, isolation set in. Water pressure at that depth squeezes more than a hull. It squeezes sanity a bit too. We rotated 3 men on watch to eyeball and listen, but none of us could get used to it. Every time the thumping paused, it sometimes did for a grim 10 seconds at a time, we shone cameras upward through the narrow observation ports. Beyond 100 feet of water, we could just see ink blackness, more than 50 fathoms of dark, then the lights of nothing. We could not physically ascend, not yet. Our reactor's coolant loop had a minor anomaly since the dive. A coolant gauge was fluctuating. CDR Huang was wrestling a reactor problem, keeping us deep until he had it stable. We hung at 16,200 feet, drifting slowly over abyssal plains with nothing to anchor to. The hull temperature was surprisingly warm from the reactor, raising concern about decompression. Throughout, the sound never stopped. I was haunted by each tomb, my heart sinking with that impossible beat. It felt personal, like something or someone was timekeeping with us. Ramirez replayed a recorded clip. He insisted it even has engine gearbox noise at the end of each pulse, a little whine, a ghost engine. Before sending any word up to higher command, Captain Monroe followed protocol. No panic, no half measures. She had us do more sanity checks. We aligned the inertial nav. No currents, no grappling anchors stuck. We checked all systems in the electronics bay. Nothing unexplained. On the nuclear side, Huang had retracted and turned off non-essential pumps and the mercury arc ballast pumps, just in case. Not a squeak was left to produce that big bass. Then we listened. One of the strangest things, the rhythm never varied. Normal ships at sea drift change their speed, but this pulse stayed at exactly 60.23 hertz, unwavering for hours. If it were a real ship circling overhead, the sound would Doppler shift as it moved. We saw no change in the frequency at all. That made it even more unnerving. Either it was stationary relative to us, or something else was controlling it. At this point, I remembered an old seafloor glitch story, the Jezebel monster of SOSS lore, where early sensors heard mysterious ocean sounds, later identified as whales. But whales don't make propeller thump. Whale song was melodic and organic. This was mechanical. If it wasn't a boat, the only other machine huge enough could be something unknown on the bottom. Subsea quakes usually zap all frequencies at once, not a steady beat. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. We occasionally felt tiny thumps on the hull, probably our creaking metal or echoes, but Ramirez pointed out in the LOFAR-gram a slight phase shift now and then. The pulses weren't all arriving perfectly in phase. It was as if whatever was making them was slightly pulsing under power, gliding or adjusting thrust. The uncertainty was maddening.
By dawn, we were frayed. Monroe declared we send a skeletal report. Contact. Unknown acoustic source overhead at extreme depth. No ID. That got routed straight to CNO and Pentagon, with no specifics on our location. They already had some telemetry fix on us via SOSUS. We'd expect high-level interest, perhaps even a recall order, but none came immediately. Shocks ran through the crew. People speculated wildly. Chief Ramirez half-vented. Maybe we stumbled on some new Soviet bathyscaphe exercise, or they've got stations on the abyssal plain. I tried to quell it. The Soviets didn't have any known vehicles diving 3 miles. Unlike our Trieste or any Maggot, they never admitted an actual design that could go that far down, at least not publicly. It felt like a paranoid dream. The politics crept in. The XO quietly warned the captain that if this got out, it'd trigger a diplomatic crisis or worse. Any official whistleblower could be fired or court-martialed. Perhaps that was why our mission was so hush-hush. We all signed non-disclosure at enlistment, but none of us had prepared for something this bizarre. That afternoon, I found myself in the equipment bay, trying to convince the oscilloscope to duplicate the effect. Still, it hummed. Coxswain Martinez, the dive supervisor, came by and quietly said, "Jake, do you think this thing we're hearing could be alive?" I looked at him. Alive? Like a sea monster? I laughed, but half curiously. Old sailors' myths floated up. Colossal squids sometimes mimic boat noises, or whales with arthritis banging bones, but the pattern was too consistent for a biological anomaly. Still, after hours of stress, even I felt irrationally spooked. We shared stories from the periphery of science, how biologists once wondered about singing leviathans, how odd sounds recorded in Antarctica, the so-called bioduck, went unexplained for decades. That bioduck was basically a rhythmic quack, which ended up being minke whales. Even that took 50 years to figure out. The thought, what if there was something massive down here making the sounds, something we'd never dreamed existed? We were careful not to whisper too often. The crew's eyes darted to each other across the dim compartments. Every mechanical beep or dropped tool saw someone whimper. Our radio silence was maddening. Once, our geology specialist mentioned the Titanic site. At 13,000 feet, Titanic's echo was faint even with active sonar. We were deeper than that, yet here was a much louder contact. If any floating iceberg or wreck were that close, it'd be on charts. What terrified us more, there was no explanation. The only thing beyond computation was age-old fear that below some depth, the ocean has its own secrets. To the superstitious mind, maybe this was fate, maybe payback. But to me and Ramirez, it was a signal waiting to be decrypted. If the Soviets were involved, they'd likely claim ignorance. If the US, then who? Not even ONI had admitted anything like this.
Night fell again, cold through the steel. We were 30 hours into this routine. The sound remained steady overhead. We debated silently. Stick around and solve the mystery, or abort and surface to explain. The captain weighed it. Our orders are to observe, and we have no orders to surface. We aren't in imminent danger yet, but danger was uncertain. In the early morning, a small freak happened. The digital compass glitched. We were slowly turning in place. Auto helm set to maintain heading might have been off by a degree. A full minute of heading drift with that engine-like noise meant something huge may have been circling us. XO Huang checked the inertial navigator. Drift of less than 0.5 degrees per minute, but consistent. Something was moving. Perhaps something was tracking our sub as we tracked its noises. That night, I took the graveyard shift. The cabin lights were off, only the red night vision lights on. I stood by the porthole around midnight, trying not to think about the crushing weight outside. "Petey, turn that damn rumble off," whispered Hale, half asleep on watch. Just then, I noticed a flicker, not on the screens, but outside. A dim glow, like bioluminescence. A streak of silvery light above us, maybe 100 feet away. It pulsed in sync with one of those booms. I blinked. It disappeared as quickly as it came. I thumbed the lights on, shouted, "Show some light on the starboard side." For a moment, the only answer was darkness. Then, on the sonar display, a faint echo pattern emerged, like a large shadow passing overhead. It wasn't in any of our charts, some random echo that shouldn't be there. When I hit the camera strobe, something reflected. A featureless steel-gray wall at weird angles. Was it part of our sub? No, we were motionless. That wall was 50 feet away and moving across our view in seconds. I yelled, "Emergency! Engineering, ballast drop on rapid ascent!" We didn't follow procedure, but I wanted to get as far away vertically as possible. Ballast shot release activated. Salt water flooded the tanks. The sound abruptly stopped mid-beat. We rocketed upward, emergency blow alarm screaming. Ramirez scrambled to grab LOFAR logging before it cut. The bearing indicator swung around. The contact vanished. The wall echo on sonar flickered out. "What the?" DDR Huang yelled as we jetted to around 5,000 feet and had to feather our ascent to avoid implosion risks. For an agonizing minute, all was silent in the sonar. A host of simultaneous alarms rang in my mind. Our sudden ascension at crash depth was itself extremely dangerous. The hull was straining. We'd triggered our own emergency. The crew braced. Then, bang, bang, bang. Boom, boom, boom. The sound resumed. But as soon as we moved, it seemed to change. Now it was behind us, our stern, still steady. The captain shouted, "Hold! Sonar, back up!" We cut the ballast blow valve slowly to slow our ascent and stabilized around 4,000 feet. We had briefly escaped the source, only to find it still chasing our hull. The propeller pulses boomed a second or third behind us. The LOFAR jumped back in roughly the same pattern, 1 second offset. The anomaly was extremely persistent. Pure terror hit. Whatever was out there was bigger than our sub and willing to pursue. The idea never crossed our order sheets. We broke the silence with plans I won't share here. After that incident, we locked down. Unable to surface safely in secret waters with an unknown foe, we limped around for 12 more hours on battery power only, creeping at minimal speed. The captain, now pale, finally said we'd only surface if absolutely necessary. Radar above water was out of the question. By dawn, day 3, we had no direct vision of the enemy. The acoustic contact changed slightly. It had new, low thudding on top of the hum, as though the engine down there had shifted gears or more blades. Our analysis, whatever the object was, it now had as many as 8 propellers, maybe 2 shafts, turning much faster. We were not imagining it. The logs confirmed the harmonic series had doubled. I punched up a final log for Naval Command and attached it to our silent black box recorder in case we didn't come back up in one piece. It was full of garbled SOFAR channel data and that impossible signature. On day 3, Silva, our XO, managed to fix the reactor glitch enough to slowly rise under power. We surfaced a few hundred miles off the coast of Japan in neutral water at dusk. The night surface was calm. 20 minutes later, the hull was breached. As air flooded in, I smelled the ocean again, a weird mix of diesel and salt. No ship was in sight above. We hurried to surface, scanning the horizon with binoculars and radar. Nothing. Whoever or whatever was following us had vanished. Perhaps our ballast blow threw it off, or it simply let us go. We filed a partially coded report into Lockheed Command, then we hightailed it back to Pearl. In the weeks after, official word was stone-cold classified, probably a Soviet sonar experiment with sounds we misinterpreted, the brass said. If any wreckage was ever found, or if satellites noticed something, we never learned. Crew were sworn to secrecy and disbelieving close ranks. We each were debriefed and then told to forget what you heard. Years later, I pieced hints from declassified archives. The SOS-US arrays did indeed remain active, now called IUSS. They quietly tracked a Titan submersible implosion in 2023, so the tech works even now. I know what we heard was no glitch and no known life form. As it was said on NPR, the detection system was likely SOSUS, but it never confirmed any surface boat. I still lie awake at night, wondering about that sonar log. Was it a Soviet bathyscaphe testing weapons? A secret research drone lost in the depths? An undersea military base we blundered into? The answer remains out there, somewhere beneath the waves. And sometimes, when the ocean is very still, I swear I can faintly hear that impossible engine sound, as if coming from the distant Mariana Trench, still turning 60 times a second, pounding across the abyss. I cannot explain it scientifically. Like the Antarctic bioduck, some sounds in the deep ocean have baffled people for decades. We know more about Mars than our own seabed, and I fear we may never know the truth of that night. All I have left is this account, a confession that our world's greatest engineers and spies were left with nothing but an unanswered mystery in the dark deep.